Well, let's get some more analysis on that summit. I'm joined by our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert. Hi there, Doug. As we were just saying there, President Putin isn't there. He addressed the summit by video link. What did he say?
It was a speech in which he basically unleashed against the West. It was an extremely familiar refrain. There was no earth-shattering headline news out of this. Look, Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year made Russia a pariah in much of the world. Obviously not all of the world. There are still many countries, especially in the East and the global South, which still support Russia either out of fear of alienating it or because ideologically they're truly on Vladimir Putin's side. That said, Vladimir Putin, as we know, has been very busy courting all the friends and allies he can find. For him, the Brics, which started out actually as just BRIC, South Africa joined in 2010. Before that, in 2009, it was just Brazil, Russia, India, China. He sees this as an ideological friendly bloc, a bloc in which if he's going to court allies, this is where he can do it. This is where his West-bashing message, a message that, and his message about Ukraine is going to fall on perhaps friendlier ears than anywhere else. What he basically did is he's done what he's done all along. Russia, nothing to see here when it comes to Ukraine. The Ukraine war is wholly the fault of the West. The antagonism, the hostility, the aggressive posture of NATO, of EU, of the United States, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, when I say it was a familiar refrain, these are themes, motifs we have heard time and again from Vladimir Putin. The question is the extent to which the members of BRICS are going to be willing to sort of heed Vladimir Putin's call, sort of to join him in this united front against these perceived antagonistic hostile powers in Europe and the U.S. and the rest of the West, or whether or not they're going to try to strike a middle ground. That is, they cannot afford to completely alienate and do not want to completely alienate the U.S. and Europe. So his message will not fall on deaf ears, but it's not going to simply be swallowed whole, as perhaps he'd want it to be. Let's not forget that South Africa is a close ally of Russia. But the reason Vladimir Putin is not physically present at this BRICS summit in Johannesburg is he knew that he would risk possible arrest if he showed up there, because South Africa is party to the founding treaty of the International Criminal Court, which issued the international arrest warrant for war crimes in Ukraine.
Okay, and as we've been saying, there are 5 members of the BRICS club, so to speak. Lots of talk about expansion of the BRICS. Who else might join?
Anyone else who wants to sort of be part of a bloc which has become synonymous with, it wasn't always as virulent, but it began the BRICS bloc, let's not forget, with a sense of being fed up with what they perceive, the countries within it, as this Western domination of the global financial system. Western powers lording it over the world's multilateral institutions, whether it's the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, European Union, NATO, the Group of 7 industrial powers. All of that were seen as antithetical to the interests of a lot of the states that joined BRICS originally. There are a lot of countries now which are sympathetic to this view and this sense that the time of U.S. and Europe dominating the global system, it's over. We can pose a legitimate alternative to this bloc, to this Western-dominated series of world institutions. So you have Saudi Arabia, giant rising power in the West that has been more and more flexing its geopolitical muscle, if you will, trying to show that it's a real dominant regional power, a decision maker, an influencer. Egypt, Iran, which has had a rapprochement of sorts brokered by Beijing recently with Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Indonesia. These are not, fledgling little powers here. These are big regional heavyweights. If they were to join the BRICS, it would add a lot of heft to their geopolitical influence. They're already about a quarter of the world's economy as they stand today, over 40% of its population, so already a big force.
Okay, and when it comes to how the West perceives this club of nations, what are their sort of main concerns, would you say?
I think the West, when it looks at BRICS, and in the beginning it didn't necessarily think that they were a bad thing. They were merely a grouping of developing countries that wanted to understandably try to find common ground, common interest, and work together in their own economic and political interests. It's perhaps taken on more sinister undertones when the West looks at the BRICS today, because it sees the growing tensions between China and the U.S., China being a paramount, very prominent member of BRICS, the most prominent prominent, perhaps. It sees the tensions, obviously, born of the Ukraine war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. All of that have added, like I said, a more sinister undertone to anything the BRICS does these days. One of the things they're doing is to they'd love to have their own currency. They'd like to de-dollarize, if you will, the global financial system. The whole system is based on the dollar. Most business trade is done in dollars. Is that going to happen tomorrow? Absolutely not. There have been attempts to roll out alternative currencies to the dollar in the past. It hasn't worked. But what it does show is these countries might more and more start trading among themselves in their own currencies rather than using the dollar as the default.